Good morning from Mission Control Houston at NASA's Johnson Space Center. I'm Nilofer Ramji with NASA Communications. We are coming to you live from the International Space Station Flight Control Room as we begin our coverage for Northrop Grumman's 23rd commercial resupply services for NASA to the space station. We are currently in orbital night, but as the sun rises in the next few minutes, you'll begin to see the cargo spacecraft while we're on the air with you this morning. The Cygnus XL cargo spacecraft, named the SS William Willie McCool, is Northrop Grumman's 22nd commercial resupply services mission to the space station. Following a 175-day stay, the cargo spacecraft is set to depart from the space station this morning. Cygnus is currently situated...
Station Sophie on 2 for Cygnus.
We're with you on 2. Go ahead.
Just as a question regarding to communication, you said that KU might be an issue today. Did you expect also some analysts or some previously? So first, do we stay on 2 the whole time? And did you have some words about the radio change or other channels, backup channels?
And Sophie, we're going to stay on 2 with you for today, and we're not anticipating any major LOSs during this event. The warning about KU is it's just been a little spotty today, but we expect we should be able to maintain our video.
Okay, good copy.
And you just heard a conversation between Capcom and European Space Agency astronaut Sophie Adeneau about today's operation and us losing or transferring between TDRS satellites as we go through our communications during the operation this morning. And there you're looking at...
I am ready for 1.602, step 2, whenever it will be the good time.
We copy. Stand by.
So that's Cygnus departure review is complete.
We copy.
Cygnus departure review is complete, and I'm standing by.
Roger, we copy. Your review is complete.
So you're looking at a live view of the Cygnus XL cargo spacecraft attached to the end of the International Space Station's Canadarm2 robotic arm. Cygnus is currently in its release position and on internal power as we continue today's operation. And there you see this bright view of the solar arrays as we're going through daylight. Cygnus is currently situated in its release position at the end of the station's robotic arm. It's sitting about 15 meters away from the orbiting laboratory. We'll follow along this morning as Cygnus is released from the station's robotic arm. Once released, we expect the spacecraft to conduct a 6-minute and 40-second departure burn and maneuver away from the space station through the keep-out sphere and the approach ellipsoid. Once the Cygnus XL spacecraft reaches the approach ellipsoid, it will keep going to further distance itself from the space station. And though our live coverage will end, the spacecraft will be commanded to deorbit on Saturday, March 14th, to dispose of several thousand pounds of trash during its re-entry into Earth's atmosphere, where it will harmlessly burn up over the Pacific Ocean. Today's departure marks the second ground-controlled robotic release of a cargo ship to leave station following the departure of the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency's HTV-X1 last week. So there we see the Cygnus XL spacecraft attached to the robotic arm in its release position as we continue today's operation. And speaking of today's operation, here on the ground in Houston, we have Flight Director As I was saying, here on the ground in Houston, we have Flight Director Garrett Hain, who's overseeing today's spacecraft departure. The Flight Director's role today is to lead and work closely with their team of flight controllers. And they're also responsible to gather information and data from all of the flight controllers in the room and lead the team through various major milestones. The Flight Director also approves or declines suggestions based on pre-established flight rules. Sitting right next to the Flight Director, to his right, to Garrett's right, we have Capcom. Today's Capcom, or capsule communicator, to Garrett's right is Aaron Edwards. Capcom serves as the primary communication between Mission Control and the crew aboard station. While there are several members in Mission Control Houston here in the flight control room, another member of the Mission Control team who's been busy supporting today's operation is the Robo Console. Today's Robo Flight Controller is Casey Chen. Casey has been working with the Canadarm2 robotic arm, maneuvering it to complete work outside the space station. And I wanted to cover one more console position while we're on the air this morning, and that is the VVO, the Visiting Vehicle Officers, who are Nicholas Lopez and Nate Yotalto. They're supporting and monitoring with the flight control teams at Northrop Grumman's facility in Dulles, Virginia for today's departure. We are just about a minute away from the go, no go poll for the release and departure of Northrop Grumman's 23rd commercial resupply departure from the International Space Station this morning. This morning, you'll hear Capcom or Aaron's voice during today's operation communicating with European Space Agency astronaut Sophie Adeno, who is aboard the space station. Adeno will be monitoring the departure of Northrop Grumman's 23rd commercial resupply services for NASA to the orbiting laboratory from the station's cupola. In addition to Adeno, there are a total of 7 crew members living and working aboard the space station. Expedition 74 represents 3 different space agencies, including NASA, the European Space Agency, and Roscosmos. Last month, Crew 12...
And Station Houston on Space to Ground 2. Sophie, you are go for Cygnus configuration checks. Perform Step 2 in 1.602, release and departure monitoring.
Step 2 for 1.602. Running now.
Go no-go poll is currently underway.
Station Houston on Space to Ground 2 for the awareness of the crew. You have 3 minutes to a no exercise constraint. That's on your timeline.
Copies. And for Sophie, Cygnus configuration checks complete. Crew is ready for release and departure.
And we copy.
Excellent. We heard several callouts right now, but in the room here in the flight control room, we did poll go for departure, and you heard Capcom speaking to Sophie Adeno, who also confirmed she is ready for today's operation. We can see views of the cargo spacecraft attached to the Canadarm2 robotic arm. We are currently in orbital daylight as the space station is flying over the west coast of South America. So as I was saying a little bit earlier, Expedition 74 does represent 3 different space agencies, including NASA, the European Space Agency, and Roscosmos. Last month, Crew 12 joined Expedition 74, which includes the NASA astronauts Chris Williams, Jessica Meir, and Jack Hathaway, and European Space Agency astronaut who I shared earlier, Sophie Adeno, as well as 3 Roscosmos cosmonauts, Sergei Kuzverkev, Sergei Mikhaev, and Andrei Fedyaev. Expedition 74 began in December 2025 following the departure of the Soyuz MS-27 spacecraft. Expedition 74 will continue into July of this year. Good morning, and if you're just joining us, we are coming to you live from the International Space Station Flight Control Room covering the departure of Northrop Grumman's Cygnus XL spacecraft from the International Space Station. You are looking at live views of the Cygnus spacecraft attached to the Canadarm2 robotic arm. Station is currently flying 260 statute miles above South America right now, and we see some great views of the solar arrays deployed on the Cygnus spacecraft. The view currently on your screen is from the end effector of the Canadarm2 robotic arm. This is the view that we will see as the Cygnus spacecraft continues to back away from the robotic arm and from the space station this morning. So we'll continue to monitor that view while we are going through our coverage this morning.
And Sophie, it's Houston on 2, just for your information. We are down 1 IMU. We're still go, but we're going to take a couple minutes to talk about it down here, so we might be a minute or two delayed from our planned release time.
Sophie copies.
And you just heard that call out between Aaron and Sophie Adenau. We are tracking for a release that might be potentially delayed, but we'll continue to monitor here in the flight control room.
And Station Houston, go for Cygnus departure on time. Perform steps 3 and 4 in 1.602, release and departure monitoring.
Go for departure, and I'm performing steps 3 and 4 of 1.602.
Good call-outs right there, and we just heard that we are just about under 2 minutes away from an on-time departure of Northrop Grumman's commercial resupply mission for NASA to the International Space Station. Once again, you are looking at live views of the Cygnus XL spacecraft attached to the Canadarm2 robotic arm. And that's about 15 meters away from the International Space Station.
And Sophie, ISS thrusters are inhibited and ground is go for release.
Sophie, ground go for release.
Good call-outs right there this morning. At this time, we just received the go for release and departure of the Cygnus XL spacecraft from the flight control teams here in Mission Control Houston, as well as the Northrop Grumman teams in Dulles, Virginia.
We're proceeding with release.
Sophie proceeding.
Release commanded.
This is Mission Control Houston as we continue joint operations.
Release commanded.
And we heard a great call out there. Release was commanded of the Cygnus XL cargo spacecraft this morning at 6:05 a.m. Central, 7:05 a.m. Eastern. As we continue joint operations between NASA and Northrop Grumman's team at their facility in Dulles, Virginia. And we should be seeing that drift out from this view right now of the end effector.
Yep, and confirms snare is open, and I begin monitoring drift out.
And we heard that call out right there. Snares are open, and the Cygnus XL spacecraft is continuing to drift out. With this on-time release and confirmation from the flight controllers here, they have disabled the space station thrusters. This happens when the robotic arm releases and the spacecraft, and it releases, the spacecraft, so the space station stays in the same orientation with no motion. Teams do this to make sure there are no automatic thrusters that are firing.
Bryn has exited the lead. Go for back away.
We copy, proceeding with back away.
Good call-outs right there as we're seeing the spacecraft back away or drift away from the space station. The spacecraft is flying free away from the robotic arm. Cygnus was successfully released from the International Space Station robotic arm this morning at 6:06 a.m. Central, 7:06 a.m. Eastern. At the time of release, the space station was flying 260 statute miles above the South Pacific.
Back away in progress.
Good callouts for back away, and we see the Cygnus XL spacecraft continuing to back away from the Canadarm2 robotic arm.
That's 1.5 meters.
We copy.
And as mentioned earlier, European Space Agency astronaut Sophie Adano is monitoring today's operation from the space station's cupola. She's going to continue to monitor as the spacecraft continues to back away from the International Space Station. We heard call-outs for proceeding with back away as well as back away in progress, and that basically means that ground teams began the commanding for the spacecraft to back away, and then the back away began, and we're seeing good views here of that separation.
Vehicle clearance, approximately 4.5 meters.
We copy. Thank you.
Great call-outs there as the vehicle continues to back away. So we're seeing a great close-up view from the International Space Station's robotic arm. You've been hearing conversation between European Space Agency astronaut Sophie Adeno as well as Aaron from our capsule communicator.
Eastern Station, Sophie, should I wait for your go for the back away complete?
We're just catching up to you. Back away complete.
Okay, so performing step 4 of procedure 1.602.
We concur.
You just heard that call out for back away complete, and we are standing by for the departure burn. Once again, Cygnus was successfully released from the International Space Station's robotic arm at 6:06 a.m. Central, 7:06 a.m. Eastern. At the time of release, the space station was flying over the South Atlantic. So as mentioned, we are standing by for that departure burn. The departure burn is a 6-minute and 40-second departure burn, and it will place the spacecraft in a 24-hour safe trajectory away from the International Space Station.
Depart commended.
And we copy. Cygnus departure burn is in progress. Monitor departure burn, step 5 in 1.602.
Monitoring step 5 in 1.602.
Great callouts as well as views that we're seeing right here. The departure burn is underway. As mentioned, it will last about 6 minutes and 40 seconds. This departure burn continues to move the spacecraft further away from the space station, which is currently just a little over 18 meters away. During the departure burn, we will hear a keep out sphere exit, so we are standing by for that call out. As mentioned, we are standing by for the keep out sphere exit. There are 2 boundaries around the International Space Station. The first is called the keep out sphere, which is like in the neighborhood of the space station. So once Cygnus passes the keep out sphere, it then travels further out and passes the approach ellipsoid. This is ultimately will set the cargo spacecraft on its 24-hour safe trajectory. These boundaries are safety boundaries that require go, no-go polls, and they're used in the unlikely event that something goes wrong with the Cygnus spacecraft as it departs. The first zone that I mentioned, called the keep out sphere, it's a zone that consists of an imaginary sphere around the space station with a radius of 200 meters. And then the second zone, a little bit further out, called the approach ellipsoid, is an imaginary shape measuring 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers. Essentially, think of it as a large 3-dimensional oval. These boundaries are just another chance to confirm that all of the guidance, navigation, and control systems are working correctly on Cygnus as it continues to move away from the space station. If you are just joining us, we are coming to you live from the International Space Station Flight Control Room here at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. We are here to continue our coverage of Northrop Grumman's 23rd commercial resupply services for NASA to the space station. The Cygnus XL cargo spacecraft, named the SS William Willie McCool, is Northrop Grumman's 22nd commercial resupply services mission to the space station. Following a 175-day stay, the cargo spacecraft departed the space station this morning at 6:06 a.m. Central, 7:06 a.m. Eastern, as the station was flying 260 miles above the South Atlantic.
Houston station, step 6 complete.
And Sophie, yes, departure burn is complete, and in fact, Cygnus has exited the 200-meter keep-out sphere. And from all of us here in Houston and our partners at Northrop Grumman and our robotics team in Montreal, we want to thank you for your assistance with the departure today. We also want to thank Cygnus as it drifts back to Earth for a job well done. This extra-large format vehicle brought aboard thousands of pounds of science and supplies, and perhaps most importantly for you folks, snacks. Missions like this don't happen without the dedication and teamwork of so many people across NASA and our partners, and that spirit of cooperation and excellence was captured in the very name of this vehicle, the SS Commander William McCool, someone who embodied those same values every day. Thanks for your help today, Sophie.
Thank you to everyone on the ground in Canada, in the U.S., and everywhere all over the world for making this beautiful event happen. It's magic to see and to witness how technology and science, what we can do with all of this. It's very beautiful from here. I'm going to hand over the mic to Jack. He has a few words to say.
Thanks, Houston, and thanks, Sophie. Good morning, everyone. I'm U.S. Navy Captain and NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway, a member of Expedition 74 on board the International Space Station. While astronauts serve long-duration missions, resupply and cargo vehicles bring new science experiments, critical hardware to carry out our mission, and care packages from our families. Leaving us today is a Cygnus cargo vehicle that carries with it a tradition of naming the spacecraft to honor someone special. This Cygnus is named in honor of Captain Willie McCool, a NASA astronaut, a naval aviator who was serving as pilot of the Space Shuttle Columbia on STS-107 in 2003, when he and the crew tragically perished during re-entry. We remember the crew and hold their families in our hearts and prayers as we continue our shared mission of human spaceflight. For me personally, it's a great honor to have followed some of Willie McCool's footsteps as an Eagle Scout, Naval Academy grad, naval aviator and test pilot, and a first spaceflight assignment as a spacecraft pilot. He was an inspiration to me when I was a young naval officer, and I strive every day to be worthy of the legacy and the example he set. I feel grateful today to be living and working on the ISS with my fellow crewmates while the Cygnus spacecraft Willie McCool was berthed to Node 1 Nadir, our Earth-facing docking port. As we watch the Cygnus depart, know that she performed her critical resupply mission flawlessly, and today we say fair winds and following seas as she heads off to complete her mission. Following naval tradition, we will now render departure honors by ringing the ISS ship's bell. Spacecraft Willie McCool, departing.
Thank you for that, Sophie and Jack. We appreciate it. And like you said, it was a job well done.
Great words from the crew, both ESA astronaut Sophie Adano and NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway. You heard several callouts and conversations just recently. Depart burn was completed, and shortly after that departure burn was completed, you heard that Cygnus did exit that keep-out sphere. This means that the SS Willie McCool spacecraft has now exited the International Space Station's 200-meter boundary. Here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room, flight controllers and mission control are in joint operations working with their counterparts at Northrop Grumman's Control Center in Dulles, Virginia. Earlier this morning, robotics operators here in Mission Control received the go to demate Cygnus, and then they used the Canadarm2 robotic arm to uninstall the spacecraft from its port and guide it away from the space station into its release position. Release was commanded and snares were opened as the spacecraft free flew away from the robotic arm. And the cargo spacecraft was successfully released from the International Space Station's robotic arm at 6:06 a.m. Central, 7:06 a.m. Eastern, as the space station was flying 260 statute miles above the Atlantic. Once released, Cygnus completed a successful departure burn that lasted approximately 6 minutes and 40 seconds, and then it just crossed the 200-meter keep-out sphere. We are now standing by, waiting for it to cross the approach ellipsoid. You are seeing room views here of the International Space Station Flight Control Room as we continue a signal handover between satellites. As mentioned, we are waiting for Northrop Grumman's 23rd Commercial Resupply Services Cygnus XL spacecraft to depart the approach ellipsoid. That's essentially a large three-dimensional oval measuring 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers that you see on your screen right now. It's the final boundary, putting the spacecraft in its 24-hour free drift trajectory. So while we are under 10 minutes away from the approach ellipsoid exit, once the vehicle crosses it, joint operations will end. So we'll then wrap up coverage, and responsibility of the vehicle is handed back to Northrop Grumman. Following a de-orbit engine firing, Cygnus will begin a planned re-entry in which the spacecraft will safely and harmlessly burn up in the Earth's atmosphere. We're under 10 minutes away from the approach ellipsoid exit, and a unique capability with Cygnus is its trash disposal. While the astronauts aboard the International Space Station unloaded the 11,000 pounds that Cygnus delivered back in September, since then the crew has repacked Cygnus again with trash and other unwanted items over the last 175 days. Yesterday, the crew aboard the space station finished packing Cygnus and configured the spacecraft for its release and departure today.
Station Houston on space to ground 2 for Sophie.
She's listening on 6.
Hey, we're about to enter a bit of an LOS here, so that no T2 constraint will remain until about 11:42 and an additional 10 minutes after that. We're not quite finished our commanding.
Copy, no T2. Do you want me to leave the Lab 1 cam then without the wide attachment on the Monitor 1?
Thanks, Sophie. We're actually done with that view, so you're go with your next activities.
Okay, thank you.
You just heard great callouts there between Capcom and the crew aboard station. We are currently going through a period of loss of signal, so although ground controllers will continue to monitor the approach ellipsoid exit, we are here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room. It's Northrop's tradition to name each Cygnus spacecraft after an individual who has made significant contributions to human spaceflight. The NG-23 Cygnus spacecraft is named in honor of NASA astronaut William "Willie" McCool. McCool was an astronaut and naval aviator who piloted the 2003 Columbia spacecraft and lost his life during the mission. His naval career included over 2,800 flight hours and in 24 aircraft and more than 400 career arrestments. After being selected by NASA to become an astronaut in April 1996, he reported to the Johnson Space Center in August 1996. McCool completed 2 years of training and evaluation and was qualified for flight assessment as a pilot. Willie McCool's spaceflight career reached its pinnacle with his role as pilot of STS-107 aboard the Space Shuttle Columbia. The mission, which launched on January 16, 2003, was dedicated to scientific research, with the crew conducting approximately 80 experiments over a 16-day period. Tragically, the mission ended abruptly on February 1, 2003, when Columbia disintegrated during re-entry, just 16 minutes before the scheduled landing, resulting in the loss of McCool and his fellow crew members.
And Station Houston.
Houston, station on 2 for ARED.
Go ahead. We've got 1 minute before an LOS.
Yeah, I see it coming. I'll just package it because it's probably an answer that you'll have to check on. Chris he put a crew note. He did tighten in order to shorten the rope, he did 2 turns on the tension mechanism knob. However, now the cable arm is popping out again. So during my workout, I went back to cable exercises, but it still wasn't staying in. We're wondering if the enemy might recommend taking one of those turns off. Basically, the rope is now just under 7 inches.
We copy and we'll assess and break. Sophie, if you are still on with us, you can no perform step 2 in your DAC activity.
And while we are continuing to monitor today's operations, that was the voice of NASA astronaut Jessica Meir speaking with Capcom here in the room. While operations are taking place, the crew is continuing to go about their daily routine, which includes exercise. So that was that conversation you heard right there. So going back to Willie McCool, I wanted to also share that in all he had logged 15 days, 22 hours, and 20 minutes in space. And in recognition of his exemplary service and sacrifice, McCool was posthumously awarded the Congressional Space Medal of Honor, the NASA Spaceflight Medal, the NASA Distinguished Service Medal, and the Defense Distinguished Service Medal. Willie McCool's legacy endures through his contributions to aviation and space exploration. So as we continue to stand by for the approach ellipsoid exit, which should be happening any minute now. If you're just joining us, we are providing live departure coverage of Northrop Grumman's 23rd Commercial Resupply Services mission for NASA to the space station. The cargo spacecraft was successfully released from the International Space Station's robotic arm at 6:06 a.m. Central, 7:06 a.m. Eastern. Once released, Cygnus completed a successful departure burn that lasted approximately 6 minutes and 40 seconds. And it then crossed the 200-meter keep-out sphere, and we are now standing by for it to cross the approach ellipsoid. We are currently in joint operations with Northrop Grumman's team in Dulles, Virginia. Once again, just standing by for the call out for approach ellipsoid exit. And we just received confirmation in the room that the SS William McCool has exited the approach ellipsoid. The Cygnus XL spacecraft is now 1,000 meters away from the International Space Station. The vehicle has moved outside the keep-out sphere and outside of the approach ellipsoid, the two major milestones that take the spacecraft outside of the neighborhood of the space station. Joint operations between NASA's International Space Station Flight Control Room and Northrop Grumman's team in Dulles, Virginia have now concluded. Northrop now leads the final phase of the cargo spacecraft's trash disposal, but first Cygnus will be commanded to gradually lower its orbit. It'll execute a series of, descent delta velocity burn Saturday morning, slowing the spacecraft to lower its altitude. And then about 4.5 hours later into Saturday morning, the spacecraft will perform a re-entry burn, once again slowing it down. This two-part braking maneuver will allow the trash-filled receptacle so it can slip out of orbit and safely burn up in Earth's atmosphere around noon Central on Saturday over the Pacific. Following the go to demate Cygnus this morning, the Canadarm2 robotic arm uninstalled the spacecraft from its port to guide it away from the space station and into its release position. The SS William McCool was released from the International Space Station this morning at 6:06 a.m. Central, 7:06 a.m. Eastern, as the station was flying 260 statute miles above the South Atlantic. Once released, Cygnus completed a successful departure burn that lasted approximately 6 minutes and 40 seconds. It then crossed the keep-out sphere and approach ellipsoid. With that, joint operations between NASA and Northrop Grumman have been completed. Thank you so much for joining us this morning as we followed along the release and departure of Northrop Grumman's 23rd Cargo Resupply Services mission for NASA to the International Space Station. You can follow all things International Space Station at nasa.gov/station. This is Mission Control Houston.